I was once deep in witchcraft. I lived in darkness, served powers that pretended to give me control, but in reality, they controlled me. Back then, I could spot witches easily because I was one of them. Today, as an ex-witch, I want to expose 5 trademarks that always identify a witch. Pay attention because number 4 will shock you. But before I begin, let me say this. Witches rarely look like what movies show you. They don't walk around in black robes with long nails chanting spells on the street. No, the most dangerous witches look completely ordinary. They could be the person you sit beside in church, the neighbor who always smiles at you, even a teacher or someone selling food in the market. When I was still practicing, I met a young woman named Anita at a spiritual gathering in Port Harcourt. By appearance, she looked innocent, soft-spoken, and respectful. If you saw her, you would never suspect she was a witch. But she had already sacrificed 2 members of her family to climb higher in rank. The shocking truth is this: witches hide in plain sight, and the only way to recognize them is by knowing their spiritual trademarks. Trademark 1: the eyes that speak without words. When a witch looks at you, it is not just ordinary. Their eyes carry weight. I remember in the coven, we were taught that our eyes are portals. A true witch can lock eyes with you and plant fear, loss, or confusion without even speaking. That is why in Proverbs chapter 6, verse 25, the Bible warns, "Do not lust in your heart after her beauty, or let her captivate you with her eyes." I once knew a woman called Grace. She ran a small provision shop in Enugu. Every man that crossed her path ended up leaving his wife or business ruined. How? Her eyes. They carried a magnetic force that enslaved people without them realizing it. I used to envy her because she never spoke much, yet men fought over her. What they didn't know was that every glance was a trap, pulling them into spiritual cages. Another instance, in a secondary school, a girl used her eyes to initiate classmates. She would stare at them in class, and later they would start seeing her in dreams. That is how powerful the eyes can be in witchcraft. Trademark 2: double personality. Witches often live double lives. In the physical world, they appear kind, friendly, and normal, but in the spirit, they are completely different. I remember how I would smile at people during the day, but at night, I would torment those same people in their dreams. That false sweetness is a mask. They can be your closest friend, even a family member, but live in 2 worlds at once. There was a man I knew in Lagos, a wealthy businessman. In the day, he was a philanthropist, giving scholarships, donating in church, even paying people's hospital bills. But at night, he was a prince in the marine kingdom, draining the very destinies of the people he had. He would bless you with one hand, but in the spirit, he chained you with the other. That is why many people get confused when they hear that a good person was involved in witchcraft. The truth is, witches are masters of disguise. They will play the role that hides their true identity. Trademark 3: unusual atmosphere around them. Wherever a witch goes, they carry an atmosphere. Some carry heaviness, others carry strange charisma that pulls people in. In my days of darkness, I was trained to project an aura that made people either admire me blindly or fear me without knowing why. This is why Ephesians chapter 6 verse 12 reminds us, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. I will give an example. There was a girl named Blessing in Unilag. She wasn't the most beautiful in her class, yet every lecturer favored her. Every man wanted her, and even women felt drawn to her. That was not natural beauty. She carried an atmosphere, a spiritual perfume that made her irresistible. I once asked her what she used, and she laughed, telling me, "You already know." She had battled in blood sacrifices that gave her that aura. On the other hand, I also knew witches that carried heaviness. Anytime they entered the room, peace disappeared, quarrels would start, people would feel tired or depressed for no reason. That is another way to sense their presence. The spiritual environment shifts when they show up. Trademark 4. Strange relationship with animals. This will shock you. One thing many don't know is that witches have unusual connections with animals. Cats, owls, dogs, snakes. These creatures become spiritual channels. During my time in witchcraft, I had a black cat that was more than a pet. It was a spiritual partner used in astral projection. Sometimes, witches will feed these animals blood sacrifices or use them as carriers for spiritual attacks. Many don't realize that what looks like a harmless pet could be a spiritual weapon. Let me tell you a story. There was an old woman in my village in Imo State. People thought she just loved goats because she always kept many of them. But at night, some of those goats were not really goats. They were spiritual beings. Whenever she left her body to attend meetings, one of those goats would fall sick and die as an exchange. Nobody suspected her because in the day she was a harmless grandmother. Another example, in Ghana, I met a witch who never traveled with her physical body. She projected through an owl that lived in a tree near her house. That owl was not just a bird, it was her chariot. If the bird was ever killed, she would die instantly. This is why not all animals around witches are ordinary. Trademark 5. Constant night activities. The last trademark is their obsession with the night. Witches are most active between 12 midnight and 3 a.m. That is their battlefield. I used to leave my body through astral projection around this time to attend meetings or carry out assignments. That is why the Bible says in Job chapter 36 verse 20, "Do not long for the night to drag people away from their homes." Midnight is their prime hour, and that is when prayer warriors must rise. I once attacked a pastor in Abuja at 2 a.m. He was praying for revival in his church. As I left my body and entered his room in the spirit, I saw fire surrounding him. The man didn't even see me, yet his prayers were like arrows. That night, I couldn't get close, and I returned wounded. That is how powerful midnight prayers are. Another time, I joined other witches in South Africa to attack a group of students fasting for 7 days. We moved into their hostel at 1 a.m., but to our shock, their voices were so loud in the spirit that it felt like thunder. We couldn't penetrate. That night, many of us were judged in the spirit realm. and some never returned from that assignment. I have just revealed 5 trademarks that identify witches. Don't live in ignorance. Be alert, be prayerful, and test every spirit. Remember, Jesus Christ has already given us victory over darkness. As Colossians 2:15 says, He disarmed the powers and authorities, making a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them by the cross.